Anson Mount takes center seat as Captain Christopher Pike, but it's his hair that steals the show. I'm Chris Goodmakers, and I'm here to break down the premiere season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. 1. To beam up. All power to shields because there's spoilers decloaking ahead. An old enemy gets a very scary update in the form of the lizard-like Gorn. This race first appeared in the classic episode Arena. In the episode, the Gorn massacre a Federation settlement and the Enterprise engages them. Their fight takes them around the home of a powerful species that forces one-on-one combat between Kirk and the Gorn captain. Kirk gets the upper hand, but spares his foe in a show of mercy. The three species part ways with a new understanding of each other. Shades of this episode are layered through the various encounters Pike and crew have with the mini-Godzillas. The Enterprise first encounters them when a similar Federation colony is attacked and destroyed. In both cases, the Gorn laid a trap for the first responders. Bad luck for them that both times it was the Enterprise. This actually makes the classic episode a rematch between the Federation starship and these malicious lizards. You think Spock or Uhura would have mentioned that? The Gorn actually only appear in live action one other time between the classic episode and now. But that was a mirror universe Gorn. I guess that would make it a Morn. Pike is living the hell out of his shore leave, riding horses and looking like he's back to his old hell on wheels ways. He's rudely interrupted by a shuttlecraft carrying Admiral Robert April. Despite this being the first time he's been seen in live action, this is actually a pretty important character in Star Trek lore. Robert April was the first captain of the USS Enterprise, this specific Enterprise. Yes, Captain Kirk was actually the third person to command the Constitution-class ship. When Gene Roddenberry first started developing the series way back in the mid-60s, his pilot script featured several different names. The USS Enterprise was the USS Yorktown, and it was captained by Robert April. These changed, but the name stuck with Roddenberry. When Star Trek returned for a widely derided animated incarnation, an episode featured the former captain, now Admiral. Since then, April has been widely accepted as the Enterprise's first true captain, though he must have only been in charge for a hot minute. Maybe he just took her out for a spin around the solar system. He's more like the first man to test drive the Enterprise. Hemmer is the cranky new chief engineer. He may look like he's a true blue Andorian to the casual fan, but he is quick to point out that that's not the case. Hemmer is an Aenar, which in the grand scale of Star Trek is a species that was introduced fairly recently. Star Trek Enterprise was the Scott Bakula starring prequel series that lasted only 4 seasons before being cancelled on one of the worst finales in the franchise's history. Still, it was a good series and featured several great episodes in its final season. A few revolved around a secret plot by the Romulans to use a drone ship to start a war. This arc included the Aenar. They are a subspecies of Andorian that live entirely underground on a frozen world. Generations of darkness has rendered them all blind, but adapted their latent psychic abilities. As a race, they are staunch pacifists, choosing to hide and run over fighting. This has resulted in them being thought of as a myth by the Andorians and being completely unknown to outsiders. At least that is until Captain Archer made contact with them and helped them join the wider galaxy. If there's one thing that would make me come out from hiding, it's Scott Bakula. I'll watch that man play water polo any day. The uniforms of Starfleet are as iconic as they are inconsistent. The crew of the Enterprise in Strange New Worlds are wearing modern interpretations of the classic gold, red, and blue tunics of TOS. This is the second interpretation of this outfit we have seen in the last few decades. J.J. Abrams gave us ones with Delta Shield patterns weaved in, and these new versions retain an element of that with patterns on the shoulders. However, the pattern is now unique to each department, with the respective symbols for operations, command, and science. You can see the same symbols on each person's badge. There are also other classic uniforms given an updated look. Pike sports the green wrap, a more casual captain's uniform. Kirk wore this on and off during the original show, and it even popped up wrapped around Scott Bakula's glorious chest. Pike's future self also wears an updated version of the Shatner-era film uniform. Not enough red velvet for my liking, though. This version retains the shoulder symbols, and it's unfortunate we never see it open with the white inseam. Thank you for watching ScreenRant. There's a pretty shocking reveal at the end of episode 7. Shocking because it's a big reference to perhaps Star Trek's worst movie. After a failed jailbreak, Spock tells Nurse Chapel that the mysterious prisoner is actually his half-brother Sybok. Born to Spock's father out of wedlock, this full Vulcan fully rejected the way of pure logic. This character has only been featured once before in the entire history of the franchise, and that was the William Shatner-directed Star Trek V: The Final Frontier.
What does God need with a starship?
The film follows Kirk and co. as they try to diehard their way through the Enterprise. It's fallen into the hands of Sybok, who has hijacked the ship in his quest for God, whom he believes resides in the center of the galaxy on the planet Shakari. Shakari is named after Sean Connery, who they hoped would take on the role of Sybok. When he passed, they went with their second choice, an absolute nobody that would work for the minimum. Sybok is dangerous because he uses mind melds to expose people to their deepest internal pain, and then claims to release them of it. This causes the subject to fall into a cult-like worship of him. He is not afraid to use this control to take hostages and hijack ships. He is obviously destined to escape his Vulcan prison because by the time of the 5th movie, he finds himself on the forsaken world of Nimbus 3, otherwise known as the Planet of Galactic Peace. It lives up to the name. As far as expanded roles go, Spock's future wife, T'Pring, is more fleshed out than that Gorn-filled big alien from episode 9. Get it? Because his flesh is out and everywhere. Spock's betrothed only appeared before in the TOS episode Amok Time. It's one of the most parodied moments in the series' history when Kirk and his boyfriend are forced to fight to the death. Spock's too horny to stop himself and almost kills his captain. It's a ploy by T'Pring to cancel the wedding so she can be with her true love, Stonn. It seems like it wasn't as callous a decision as the original series would have you believe, because this relationship was always on the rocks. We even see Stonn working with T'Pring on the Vulcan Rehabilitation Center. She later tells Spock in Amok Time that Stonn was there for her when he was off with Kirk. Expect to see more of him as a shoulder to cry on for T'Pring. That's if Vulcans cried. And use shoulders for such an illogical reason. It may be far more common for captain and crew to beam everywhere, and it's always better on the budget. However, that hasn't stopped the various starships featured in the franchise from including various shuttles and support crafts. Kirk's Enterprise was the first to ever show one on screen with the shuttlecraft Galileo. Well, it turns out the Galileo is always on board the Enterprise, as it's the shuttle La'an and Spock take to recon their Gorn pursuers. Both versions even retain the desk lamp that points directly at your face. How handy! While Spock, Uhura, and Chapel all stick around to serve under Kirk, there's another member of the crew that chose to continue on after Pike's departure. Dr. Mbenga is the chief medical officer aboard the Enterprise, but it looks like he takes a step back from a leadership role in the future. The character appeared before in the original series episode, A Private Little War, where he helped Spock recover from a gunshot wound. That episode also makes it perfectly clear that he is aware of Chapel's secret love for Spock. I'm sure season 2 holds some awkward moments ahead for the good doctor. It also looks like between this show and Kirk's time, he will lose both his beard and accent. That's okay, somehow Lieutenant Kyle changes from a small Asian man to a buff Irish guy.
People are idiots. You're fun.
Lieutenant Una Chin Riley, aka Number 1, is the ass-kicking first officer under Captain Pike. She's a character that goes all the way back to the very first piece of Star Trek ever made. This series finally gives her both a name and a backstory. Lacking even a name in the pilot, she now has a previous relationship with the newly introduced La'an. We also learn that she is an Illyrian, a species that practices genetic modification. Una is played by X-Men's Rebecca Romijn, who in real life is married to Jerry O'Connell. O'Connell is currently playing Lieutenant Jack Ransom, the first officer of the Cerritos on Star Trek Lower Decks. I guess they're each other's number 1. At the end of the season, Lieutenant Una is arrested for hiding her genetic modifications. Why is that such a big deal? When it comes to the Federation, genetic modification is a big red flag. The reason goes deep into the fictional history of Earth and Lieutenant La'an's evil ancestor. Thanks to years of name-screaming parody, most people are familiar with Khan. He was a human born of advanced eugenics along with hundreds of others. These armies of supermen and women became tyrants that waged war across the globe. Their reign of terror resulted in millions of deaths and untold destruction. Humanity managed to overthrow them, but not before Khan and nearly 80 of his fellow superhumans escaped into space in cryogenic stasis. By the way, all this happened sometime in the mid-90s. Since the eugenics war ended, genetic engineering has been strictly illegal in the Federation. Other characters have been in Una's place before, or rather, will be in her place. Dr. Julian Bashir was genetically modified as a child by his parents in secret. It's a revelation that nearly causes his imprisonment too. We will see how long it takes Pike to steal the Enterprise and bust Una out of prison next season. Maybe they can team up with the Cerritos and break out Captain Freeman while they're at it.
Captain Kirk is climbing a mountain. Why is he climbing a mountain? To hug the mountain.
The season finale gives us a brand new Captain Kirk in the form of Stefan from the Vampire Diaries, and he's actually pretty great. What is it with teen vampire heartthrobs nailing portrayals of iconic characters lately? In just one episode, we get some great connections to the wider canon of Kirk's history. When he arrives, he is captain not of the Enterprise, but of the USS Farragut. In the original series, Kirk talked about his time as a lieutenant aboard the Farragut, where a deadly fart cloud claimed the lives of some of his crew members. Because Pike remained in command of the Enterprise in this possible future, Kirk instead had to settle for command of his old ship. He's still the youngest captain in Starfleet history, however, because there is nothing keeping this man from the center seat. At the end of the episode, he also tells Pike that his father was the first officer of the USS Kelvin. This is the case in two universes, because we see the Kelvin and Kirk Sr. in the 2009 J.J. Abrams reboot. In that universe, a time-traveling Romulan destroyed Papa Kirk and the Kelvin. But in this one, George lived to see both his sons enter Starfleet. Just one more reason the Prime timeline is better. The very first episode features a cheeky head fake for viewers that thought Kirk was an only child. Lieutenant Samuel Kirk joins the crew and pops up over the course of the season. Despite how much damage he takes, Kirk's older brother has a bit of plot armor, as we have already seen when he dies. The very first season finale in Star Trek history was Operation Annihilate. In the episode, Kirk and the Enterprise find yet another destroyed Federation colony. This time, a race of slug-like parasites has dispatched most of the population, including Samuel Kirk and most of his family. His son, Jim Kirk's nephew, survives thanks to Spock risking permanent blindness to find a cure. Sam and Spock serving together retroactively adds more meaning to Spock's choice to expose his eyeballs to blinding light. Plus, Sam's facial hair is a funny in-joke considering the character was originally just William Shatner in a fake mustache. The season finale takes us 7 years into Pike's future and right into the middle of the first season of Star Trek. It's a what-if scenario where Pike is in command of the Enterprise during the events of Balance of Terror. In the original timeline, Kirk was in command and pursued the bird of prey with far more aggressiveness than Pike. Kirk's battle of wits with the Romulan captain led the Enterprise to getting the upper hand at a crucial moment and crippling the new Romulan weapon and averting a war. Things go differently for Pike. This episode features direct recreations of scenes from the old episode. The reveal that Romulans look like Vulcans is an almost exact recreation. There's also several echoed lines, such as the Romulan captain's final lament,
"You and I are of a kind."
In a different reality, I could have called you friend.
and the destruction of the Federation outpost. Both timelines even feature the doomed newlyweds, though this time, it's the bride who falls victim. I guess it was just never meant to be. Harsh, Star Trek. Another legacy character that is greatly expanded is the feisty nurse Chapel. This white-haired physician was basically a main character on the original series. The biggest ongoing plot revolved around her unfulfilled love for the pointy-eared science officer. While this modern Chapel is portrayed wonderfully by Jess Bush, She is following an important woman in Star Trek history. Nurse Chapel was originally played by Majel Barrett. Barrett first played number 1 in the pilot episode, but when that character was dropped, she was moved to the role of Nurse Chapel. Since then, she went on to play the eternally horny Loxana Troi, mother to TNG character Deanna Troi. Barrett also provided the computer voice for both Kirk and Picard's Enterprises and the USS Voyager. She also married Gene Roddenberry. Some downtime leaves Una and La'an alone on the Enterprise. When the ship is docked at Starbase 1, the pair catch 2 ensigns playing Enterprise Bingo. The game is half scavenger hunt, half truth or dare, all defiance of authority and regulation. So what's on the list of stunts and shenanigans? Well, the ones we see La'an and Una perform are reflavoring gum with the transporter while you're chewing it. There's also dueling with phasers set to minimal stun, and taking an unsanctioned spacewalk to sign a piece of the Enterprise's hull. Also on the list, however, are sneaking a tribble into the transporter buffer. A tribble is an exponentially breeding ball of fur. Presumably some unlucky officer would beam aboard suddenly holding one. I retroactively want bingo for every ship and station featured in the series. Space. The final frontier. These words opened every episode of both the original series and the follow-up series The Next Generation. Strange New Worlds brings back the iconic monologue. While it has been spoken in several of the films and a few episodes have featured lines from it, this is the first series since The Next Generation to have it in every opening. The speech has been changed a few times over the years, and this version features a few variations. It refers to the ship's 5-year mission, which was in TOS, but was changed to ongoing mission for various versions afterward. However, Strange New Worlds uses the more modern and inclusive where no one has gone before, as opposed to no man. Space may be the final frontier, but it's for everyone. A running subplot this season is Captain Pike being given knowledge of his future. However, the real problem he faces is that it's not a complete picture. His choice to try and avert this future leads him to face an alternate future where his accident never happened. Spock tells him that the incident happened several months in the past. The episode recreated for this finale is the classic episode Balance of Terror, which aired just a few episodes after the Menagerie. This was Star Trek's only 2-parter and introduced viewers to Pike, who had suffered an accident and become unable to move or communicate. Spock steals Pike and the Enterprise and takes them to Talos, where an alien race helps Pike live a normal life once again. Because Pike doesn't know about this event, just the accident, Pike's happy ending has already been written. He just doesn't know it yet. Star Trek is finally back to exploring strange new worlds. The latest series has returned to the roots of the storied sci-fi franchise, bringing us episodic parables that aren't afraid to get a little goofy and very gooey. Strange New Worlds is a return to form for Star Trek. Season 2 just wrapped filming and promises even more Jim Kirk, Sybok, and Pike's glorious hair.